Okay, good evening and welcome, and I want to thank very much the hosts for this evening. The food is spectacular. I mean, I had to tear myself away from the table to come and speak. I was like, and I understand a lot of it was homemade. Is that correct? All of it. Yeah. I already have. Yes. There's a professor I was once listening to who was talking about a Soren Kierkegaard, who is a famous Christian philosopher, and he kept referring to him as the Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard. I asked him afterwards, why do you refer to him as Danish? That's irrelevant. He was a Christian philosopher. And he said to me, he says, I'm talking to a Jewish audience. I want to get their attention. I say Danish. It picks up, it gets their attention. So certainly the presence of such delicious food definitely gets our attention. Certainly got mine. So at the time of the Rambam, in the 13th century, as you probably know, the Jewish people suffered a fair amount of persecution under the Almohad Muslims who invaded Spain, which is why the Rambam and his family had to flee, and later on Morocco, and of course the Jews of Yemen, of Tayman. Tayman is the Hebrew for Yemen. Yemen is not... I have a friend who was in the Israeli army from Toronto. His Hebrew was almost non-existent. So they had grenade practice. So you run down between these sandbags, and they ask you, they want to know if you're left or right-handed. You don't want to be juggling a grenade first time you throw it. It's not a great idea, right? It can get awkward, right? So the officer says to my friend, he says, Yemeni. Yemeni, my friend's thinking to himself, why is he asking me if I'm a Yemenite? My friend says, Ashkenazi. The officer looks at him like he's insane. And he says again, Yemeni. My friend says, Toronto. What's even more amazing is he gave him the grenade anyway. So anyway, in Igeris, in Yemen, the Jews had experienced tremendous persecution, and also in other places. And the Rambam has two amazing letters addressed to the Jews at that time. One is called Igeris Hashmad, and the other is called Igeris Tayman. And he emphasizes one idea in both of these letters, which is an amazing idea, and it's a very central idea. He says the following: there were rabbis at the time who said that once a Jew converts to Islam, once a Jew commits apostasy and abandons his or her faith, they are no longer Jewish, they are no longer accepted into the community, they can no longer return. And the Rambam says this is completely misguided and incorrect. The Rambam says, Zera Avraham Eino Kala, the seed of Abraham, the generations, the children of Abraham will never ever dissipate, will remain Jewish no matter what. He says even someone who does Averis that you cannot even imagine, he gives the example, Yerovam ben Nevat, Shchik Atzomos, Yerovam, who was Chata, V'hichti es Yisrael, he sinned and he caused others sin, and he sinned in some serious areas, and just like have, milk without a great hatchet. I mean, this guy did Avodah Zarah, he made other Jews do idolatry, he was a serious sinner, and yet, the Rambam puts it, he says he too is obligated to sit in the sukkah on Sukkos. He is obligated in all the mitzvahs. He can never erase his Judaism. And there's a famous story which Rav Chaim Volozhiner mentions in Siddur Agra about the Gaon of Vilna was at some type of inn somewhere in Lithuania, and inns were often owned, many of them were owned by Jews, and he's sitting at the inn eating, and a Jew comes in who was apparently an Apikoros. I don't know how the Gaon of Vilna knew he was an Apikoros. He had a t-shirt, probably Apikoros and proud, or something like that. So either way, he comes in there, and he orders a drink from the Jewish innkeeper. And the Gaon of Vilna, the Gra, says to the innkeeper, don't give him a drink, he will not make a bracha. Do not give him the drink. The Apikoros, the heretic, says, are you kidding me? He says, do you know what Averis I do? I do every Aver in the book, I do every sin in the book. He says, I'm a heretic, for heaven's sakes. Probably wouldn't say for heaven's sakes if he's a heretic. But whatever. He says, I'm a heretic. So he says, brachas. The Gaon of Vilna said to him, don't think that by doing serious sins, you have exempted yourself from any mitzvah. He says you are still Jewish, you are still liable in all the mitzvahs, you're still obligated in all the mitzvahs, and all the stuff that you have done, you'll get punished for, but you still have to do the mitzvahs. And therefore you still have to say a bracha, and therefore he should not serve you the drink. The guy apparently, according to the story, this is the usual ending, collapsed in tears on the spot and did tshuva. I have tried this, it hasn't worked for me. Although, I was in a taxi, Moshe Shapiro, my Rabbi Oliver Sholem was in a taxi. The taxi driver was driving us, and he said, "Do you mind if I pull over and get a falafel?" Falafel, right? So I'm sitting there. Oh, this is really serious, right? I mean, he's driving a shift. He's going to be eating a falafel as well, right? Okay. So so he pulls over and he runs over to a falafel stand. The meter was still on, right? Gets the falafel, comes back into the car. He gets the car into, and he's about to eat it. And Moshe looks at him and he says, "Bli bracha, bli netilat yadayim, no bracha, no washing the hands." And the guy says, "Ani lo dati, I'm not religious." So Moshe says, "Azma." So what? He's supposed to say bracha. And the guy said, "Ani ekach et hakol b'sitanaut." I'll take everything in bulk. All the punishments in bulk. So Moshe says, "You know that you're speaking foolishness, don't you?" The guy says, "Ken." There's a very depressed silence. I think he may have said a bracha, and he drove off. It's unbelievable. But yes, the fact is that a Jew is 100% Jewish, no matter how far they have strayed away from Yiddishkeit. Remember, as another example of a taxi driver, I got into a taxi just outside the yeshiva I was at, Mishkan HaTorah, got into the taxi and it was in Unsdorf. Right, familiar with Unsdorf? It's one of the 7 dwarfs. Yeah. So anyway, I get into the taxi. There were 7 kahillos. There were 7 kahillos in Mattersdorf. Right. Anyway, so why is that funny? I don't know. Okay, so the taxi driver says to me, "Talomed po, do you study here?" Apparently non-religious taxi driver. I said, "Ken." He said, "Ezo shiur, whose shiur are you in?" I think to myself, what? How could he possibly know who's? So I said, Rav Shapira, Rav Moshe Shapira. He said, "Mi bayit v'gam." I said, "Ken." Yeah. He said, "Yeah, from bayit v'gam." He says, "Because of him," he says, "I keep Shabbat." I said, "Tagidli, tell me how, what happened?" He says he had moved into Rehov Uziel, not long before then. He says it was a rainy day. I'm about to get into my taxi to go to start the day, and I see this very impressive looking man in a rush coming out of his door. He was on the ground floor for his daughter. So he was coming out the door. So I said, "Rabbi, tikanes, ani ekach otcha. Rabbi, get in. I'll give you a ride. I'm a neighbor. I'll give you a ride for free." So Moshe, this is the taxi driver. I heard this not from Moshe Shapiro. I heard this from the taxi driver. Taxi driver says he gets in the taxi. I take out the key, put it in the ignition. Moshe puts his hand on my hand, looks into my eyes, and says, "Atalo noseh b'Shabbat, Ken? You don't drive on Shabbat." So the taxi driver said, I looked into his eyes, I couldn't say yes. I felt it would hurt him so much. I didn't say yes. He said, on the other hand, he says, "Ani lo shakran, I'm not a liar." So I couldn't say no. So his hand's on my hand, the keys in the ignition. I can't say yes, I can't say no. I says, "As makara, what happened?" He said, "Nishbati. I took an oath that I would not drive again on Shabbat." And I looked to him and I said, "Ani lo noseh b'Shabbat. I did not drive on Shabbat." And Ramon said, "Yofi." And then we drove off. Don't try this. End up with a key in your nostril or something. But nevertheless, that is the idea. And this concept, the Rambam, who points out this concept that once a Jew, always a Jew, this, of course, we know from the Gemara. The Gemara says, when Yeshua conquered Yericho, Yeshua, as we know, made a ban on looting Yericho. And one person transgressed that ban and looted the city of Yericho. That was Achan. So Hashem says, Chata Yisrael. Israel has sinned. Chata Yisrael. The Gemara deduces from here, it's Gemara Sanhedrin, Gemara deduces from here, Hashem says, Israel sinned. The Gemara says, Afal pi shechata, even though he has sinned, Yisrael, he is still Jewish. He may have sinned, yes, but he is indeed still Jewish. And it's interesting, we have a tradition that the first paragraph of Aleinu, at the end of davening, the first paragraph was written by Yeshua. The second paragraph was written by Achan. We have a tradition that was written by Achan. And his name is signed in an acronym in the first three words. Al Kain Nekaveh. Al, Ayin, Kain, Chaf, or Kaf, Nekaveh, we have hope. And it's not by chance and random that Achan signed his name in those words in that second paragraph. Because what does it mean? Al Kain Nekaveh means what? We have hope. Achan is the symbol of hope. Because Achan, although Afal pi shechata, even though he sinned, Yisrael hu. So therefore, Al Kain, and therefore Nekaveh, we can have hope. Anyone can have hope, because no matter how far they have gone, even though they have sinned, Yisrael hu, Al Kain Nekaveh, therefore we have hope. And it was very interesting, the word for hope, tikva, kav, is related to the word kav, which means a line. Think about it. If I lost something in this room here, and one of you found it, you would, as you know, be obligated to say, Hashavah Saveda, right? To try to return it to its correct owner. Now, what connects me to that object? How is it still mine? It's not in my possession. It's not under my control. I don't have it with me. What connects me to that object? So, what connects me to that object is the hope that I'll get it back. That's the kav, the line, that connects me to the object. By the same token, if I would lose something, if I would drop my phone and Penn Station, New York, 5 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, if I would drop my phone, 5 o'clock, Monday afternoon, Penn Station, New York, I would not bother getting off the subway at the next station and coming back. You know why? What are the chances of my getting that phone back? Probably zero. Close to zero. At that point, I have no kav, line, connecting me to that object. Tikva, there's no hope of getting it back, and so it's not mine anymore. It's not my possession. It's not under my control, and that one line that connects me to it has been severed by my giving up of hope. Because I know that no one's going to give it back to me. Right? Almost guaranteed. Not 100% guaranteed, but almost guaranteed. And so that is the Al Kain Nekaveh, that idea. And we know of many cases in history, not just in the case of the Rambam, in the case of the Jews who had become Muslims during that persecution in Yemen, in Tayman, but also Jews in other cases. In 1391, in the north of Spain, massive riots broke out against the Jews. And that began a phenomenon of Jews. At that time, many Jews were slaughtered, many Jews were beaten, many Jews converted to Christianity. And a lot of these Jews, we don't know exactly how much they kept, how much they didn't keep, but a lot of them, basically, although they were Christians externally, they kept some level of Torah and mitzvahs secretly. We call them anusim, people who are forced, crypto Jews, hidden Jews. What exactly they kept, and they had all types of issues there. First of all, what did they? We don't call them Maranos. Usually it's a derogatory term, right? So these Jews may have kept something. We don't know exactly what they kept. I know there's been studies about it. Some say they kept a lot. Some say they kept a little. We don't really know how much they kept. One of the great experts on it was Ben Sion Netanyahu. Bibi's father was a professor. And one of his expertise was actually the period of the Inquisition. And it's actually one of my favorite acts of Israeli diplomacy ever. Was the first time Bibi met the Pope. His present to him was his father's book about the Inquisition. I said, you've got to hand it to him. Now, just for that alone, he's no time. Anyway, so in 1391, when a lot of these Jews, at least externally converted to Christianity, they were now faced with an unbelievable dilemma. They were living in Spain, living in an Inquisition, where the Inquisition was focused on Christians who were not true Christians. You could be actually a Jew openly in Spain up until the expulsion, 1492, but to live as a Christian, they were now interested in seeing if you were authentically Christian. And there would be scrutiny and investigation, and of course horrific stuff happened. So Jews under those situations, what could they do? Teaching their children. Their children were going to school where they were learning from Catholic priests. The children's only knowledge, and by the way, one of the great dilemmas was, when do you tell the children that they are in fact Jews? You tell them when they're too young, what's going to happen? They'll blurt it out at school and you'll be arrested. You tell them when they're too old, they'll already be committed Christians and they'll turn you in to the Inquisition. So when do you tell them? What a horrific dilemma that parents would have. What do you keep? Some people, there are reports that Tanis Esther was one of the things that they used to keep. Why Tanis Esther? Because they identified with Esther as being the first crypto-hidden Jew. Here she was in the palace of Ahasuerus, but Ein Mageres Moladata, she didn't tell anyone who she was. So they identified with her in some sense. So 1391. Now some of these families remained in Spain well beyond the expulsion, because the expulsion only applied to people who were Jews, these people who were keeping Christianity. And some of these people did not leave until the 17th century. And you know what happened with a lot of these people who left Spain in the 1500s, 1600s? Some of these people, when they left Spain, you know what they would do? They would join the Jewish community. They would go to Hamburg, or to Amsterdam, or to Salonika, or to Istanbul, and then actually join the Jewish community. That's an amazing thing. That's unbelievable. Here are people who lived as Christians for how many years? I can't do math, but 1391 till 1650 in some cases. That is a long time, it's a few hundred years. Whose children were being taught in Catholic schools, who were not even sure at what point to tell their children how Jewish they were or if they were Jewish, who maybe the only thing they were keeping was possibly Tanis Esther and maybe lighting a candle occasionally on Friday. Right? Who knows? And yet, Zera Avraham Einakala, as the Rambam says, Afapi Shechata Yisrael, that nitzos, that spark of Yiddishkeit, remained within these people for so long. It's an amazing thing. And we see amongst the poskim, their attitude to people like that who've returned to Yiddishkeit was incredible. The Chacham Tzvi, fascinating tshuva in the Chacham Tzvi. This is a family there was a husband and wife who'd fallen into the Shabtai Tzvi, Yimach Shmo. They'd fallen into Sabbateanism. They were committed, Shabtaim, as they call them, committed to that. And these people had been living and they actually had been, when he converted 1666, converted to Islam, they converted with him. And they were living as, with many other issues other than Islam was probably one of their smallest problems, to put it that way. And yet, this husband and wife decided to return to Yiddishkeit. And they come to a place in, where was it, in a place called Candia. And in Candia, it's a city in Crete, they come to Candia and they've returned to Yiddishkeit. And the Gabbai of the shul decides to give this man Chosen Torah. Chosen Torah. As you can imagine, people in the shul objected. These people were followers of Shabtai Tzvi. They had become Muslims. Now they're giving Chosen Torah. And not only that, but they mentioned there was a Rav Eliyahu Kapsali who had said, he had made a gezerah, a decree, famous Rav there, Rav Eliyahu Kapsali, who made a decree that you should only give Chosen Torah, the Aliyah at the end of the Torah, Simchas Torah, to an Adam Choshuv, meaning an important person. The Chacham Tzvi says, no problem, you can give it to this man. Once he has done tshuva, he comes back to Klal Yisrael, and even when they were part of the Shabtai movement, even when they were Muslims, they were still Jews. And now that they've returned, they are no less Jewish than anyone else. And not only that, but he says, you say, Rav Eliyahu Kapsali says, only give it to an Adam Choshuv. He says, we know, b'makom shebalei tshuva oimdim, in a place where a Baal Tshuva stands, afilu tzadikim gemurim, even the righteous cannot stand there. He is indeed an Adam Choshuv. An amazing level of understanding. And by the way, the Chacham Tzvi was not what you would describe as liberal, right? To say the least, right? And he was a kanoi, and yet hearing the acceptance of a Jew who'd strayed far away, but yet come back, amazing thing. Yad La'achim, recognises this idea. We have Jewish women in Muslim garb, in Arab villages. And who knows? Did they go deliberately? Did they go because they are, for whatever reason? We're not judging. We don't judge the reasons. We just know that we haven't lost the tikva, the hope of their return. We are still attached to them by that thread of hope that these people will return. And so bringing them back, and whether it's Jews who are being seduced by missionaries, in which Yad La'achim plays a major role in defence against missionaries, what we will call today defence against the dark arts, for those who've read Harry Potter, right? But the idea of this type of defence, this is the front line. And these Jews who have been taken in by missionaries, who are seduced by missionaries, these Jews are also our brothers and sisters. And it's interesting. There's an idea that we have an emunah. We have emunah. We all have emunah, right? Interesting. The Ger Rebbe was asked. He was asked the following. One of the Sfas Emes, I think it was. Someone asked him, I have a hard time with emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with belief in Hashem. And the Sfas Emes said, he says, Hashem is easy to believe in. He says, as Klal Yisrael is a little harder. Belief in Klal Yisrael. But we have, by the way, someone also asked the Sfas Emes to bring proof of Hashem's existence. He said, what do you mean? It's simple. The Rambam paskins that Hashem exists. The Raven doesn't argue. The Rambam, no, but you need greater proof than that. It's like the one thing that there is literally no argument on in Judaism. Like literally, there's no one disagrees. But what does this mean to believe in Klal Yisrael? Believing in Klal Yisrael means that I believe that every single Jew is worth saving. That I believe that every single Jew, no matter what they've done, where they've gone, where they live, how far they've strayed, what they're wearing, what they're worshipping, etc., I believe that that Jew is still 100% a Jew. And that's what it means to be Naaman. By the way, Moshe Shapiro used to explain, the word Naaman doesn't really mean only belief. The word Naaman means loyalty. Loyal. An Ish Naaman is someone who's loyal. Uskativ Yosei b'makom Naaman. The Pasuk says, I will plant it as a stake, but makom Naaman. What do you mean makom Naaman? When everyone been camping, so you drive your tent peg, you want to drive it into a firm soil where the tent peg won't move. That's Naamonos, that means loyalty. We are loyal to each other. So Naaman, Nemunah in Klal Yisrael means two things. A, it means belief in the other Jew, and it also means loyalty to the other Jews. Reb Nachman of Breslov says very beautifully in Likutei Moharan, he says the following. He says, you are not capable of actually being metakein, fixing someone, redeeming someone, helping someone, unless you first of all believe that there's something in them that can be helped. If you don't believe that the other person has got Kedusha in them, you will not be able to help them. So the same applies to yourself, by the way. If you don't believe in yourself, you cannot. It's interesting, just as a side question, the Rambam lists 13 ikrim, the Yud Gimel Ikrei Emunah. It's interesting, many of the Mefarshim discussed that. A lot of people ask, why doesn't he include in the 13 principles of faith belief that we are the chosen people? Type of interesting question. Rav David Cohen discusses it in his Sefer, Yud Gimel Ikrei, but Rav Weinberger discusses it. Right? Why not? So some say, for a very simple reason, he already has belief in Mashiach. Belief in Mashiach means belief in the Jewish people. Kol Anavim Kulam Nisnavu al Tshuva. Every single prophet prophesied that the Jewish people will do Tshuva. So that means that the Mashiach is predicated upon the belief in the Jewish people. We believe that the Jewish people will do Tshuva. That type of belief is what Rav Nachman is talking about. A belief in the Jewish people, a belief that the other person has got a spark of goodness within them. The Tanya, in Perek Lamed Beis, in the very famous Perek in the Tanya, appropriately Lamed Beis, Leiv, right? The Tanya says that, there's a Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos the following. It says, Hevi mitamid shel Aaron, should be a student of Aaron, oyev shalom, love peace, roidev shalom, pursue peace, and listen carefully, ohev es habrios umekarvan l'Torah, which means, let's translate that literally, ohev es habrios, love creatures. Creatures, that's actually correct, creatures. Right? Ohev es habrios umekarvan l'Torah, and bring them close to Torah. So now obviously, by creatures, it must be referring to humans, because be makarev you can't be makarev an animal to Torah. That's right. There's no such thing impossible. You mean there was a famous bar mitzvah teacher who said you could teach a bear to lane like a bar mitzvah boy. You put honey on the Zov Torah and he'll daven just like anyone does. Right, but being makarev someone, right, obviously he must be referring to humans. And if he's talking about l'karvan l'Torah, bring them close to Torah, he must be talking about Jews. And yet the term used is brios. So the Tanya points out, what does bria mean? Literally means creatures. Creatures. You know, what that means, the Tanya understands, is that the only positive thing you can say about this person is what? He was created by Hashem. So imagine on your resume, right? The only thing on your resume say, created by God. You're not going to get a shidduch. Guaranteed, right? That's it? What do you mean, that's it? You're getting picky? Right? Created by Hashem. He says that's it. That means they have no merit other than the fact they're created by Hashem. And yet, we are told to love such a person and to bring them close to Torah. The Tanya asks, there is an idea that you have to hate the Rasha. But he says it's a love-hate relationship. He says you have to hate the evil, but love, hanitzoitz hakadosh, hatamon bekirba machayas nafsham, you have to love the holy spark within them that gives life to their very soul, the spark of godliness within each and every one of us. So he says, yeah, I have to hate the evil, but I have to love the person. And that means oihev esabriois, love creatures, someone who the only positive thing you can say about this person is, he was created by Hashem. And yet such a person, there's an obligation of love for such a person. So whether this person is someone who deliberately went off and married an Arab and lives in an Arab village, whether it's someone who took a financial inducement because the missionary offered them, it doesn't matter. Whatever they did, I must hate that evil, but I have to love that person, u'makarav the Torah, and bring them close to Torah. What is our obligation to bring someone close to Torah? Where does this come from? So it says makarav the Torah, it says in Pirkei Avos. Where does this come from? There are a few sources. First of all, and very interesting to note, you know, we say every day in Shema, ve'ahavta es Hashem elokecha, love Hashem. How do you fulfill the mitzvah of loving Hashem? Do you sit there and right, and have like warm, fuzzy thoughts? Exactly how do you, it's not so simple. How do you fulfill the mitzvah of loving Hashem? Right? I mean, how do you do that? The Rambam says the following. The Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos, he says very, very beautifully, and this is based on the Sifri, he says, Ahavehu al habrios, make him beloved to people. Make him, by the way, he uses the term brios as well. But anyway, but I don't know, because it's translation from the Arabic, so I don't know what he said in the original. But okay, but he says, make Hashem beloved to people. Create the relationship between them and Hashem. That's how you fulfill the mitzvah. And the Rambam goes on to say, he says, to be makar of people. He says, how does this work? He says, Kvar amu mitzvah koleles shenikra anashim kulam la'avodasi yisrael. We should call to people to come close to Hashem and to serve Him, ulahamim bo, and to believe in Him. He says this is basically what it means. And he says, where do we learn this from? Avraham and Sarah, hanefesh asher asu b'charan, the souls that they created in Haran. And there are numerous different explanations for it, but one explanation is, as Rashi himself says, it means the people that they brought, tachas kanfei hashchina, the people they brought to monotheism, the people they brought to the love and to the belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course we are told, hashavas aveda, we mentioned before, tikva, means that's the kav that connects me to my lost object. We are connected to every Jew. It is interesting, we are told, the Torah says, you see chamor, a donkey that your friend lost. This doesn't happen to us often nowadays, right? People don't lose donkeys, right? Because they have GPS trackers in them. But again, if someone loses something and you see it, sion idachim, etc., hashav tishavein lo, you must return it to them. You have an obligation to return it. And it's interesting, the Gemara goes on to say, what about if someone loses their body? How do you lose your body? It's like, sometimes before coffee, I feel like, in the morning, right? Where is, right? But nevertheless, I mean, how do you lose your body? So hashavas, Gemara says, hashavas aveda degufa, restoring, means if someone loses the use of a limb, God forbid, if someone is sick, if someone loses their health, there's a mitzvah of hashavas aveda, meaning, and we learn this from a kal v'chomer, how much more so? If I'm obligated to return their donkey, If I'm obligated to return their wallet, how much more so am I obligated to return their arm, their brain, their body? Of course so. So Rav Cohen pointed out to me that it's an Orach Chaim, but I saw it in the Minchas Chinuch, the Maramshik, but they say the following, Kal v'chomer, how much more so if someone has lost their contact with their soul. No one ever loses their soul, but they've lost contact with it. They are nidachim baderech. They are Jews who are lost. How many Jews are lost? Whether they're in Arab villages, whether they're being seduced by missionaries, whether they are completely devoid of any knowledge of Yiddishkeit, we have, first of all, to believe that they are still Jewish. Second of all, ne'emanos, meaning to be loyal to them. Third of all, we have the mitzvah of ahavas Hashem, which is that they should also love Hashem, and we obviously have the mitzvah of ehavta l'reacha kamoicha, as the Ramban says, you should want your fellow Jew to have everything that you have. B'oisher, b'nechasim, b'kavod, b'chochma, with wealth, with property, with wisdom, and with honor, all of the things that we have. If we have the joy and we have the privilege of Torah, we have the joy and the privilege of mitzvahs, so surely we should want our fellow Jews to have exactly that as well. That is a basic idea of ehavta l'reacha kamoicha. But certainly, Hashavas Aveda is the Hashavas Aveda not just of Gufoy, but the Hashavas Aveda of the very nefesh and the neshama. I would also point out there's a very famous idea called Arvus. Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh b'zeh. Every Jew is responsible one for the other. I want to tell you, amazing thing happened to me when my wife and I were engaged. It was about 3 weeks, I would say, before we got married. I remember this well. And we had got an apartment in Kiryat Moshe. So we were olim. So the government, it was a $200 a month rent. I know this is, you can cry. $200 a month rent. And the government was paying $175 a month rent as a loan. If we would stay in Israel for more than 5 years, it would become a grant. So basically we're paying $25 a month rent for an apartment in Kiryat Moshe. Okay? But in order to get this loan from the government, we needed 4 guarantors, 4 Arevim. So we had to get 4 people of a certain age, certain income, Israeli citizens, who had to sign that if we, the Bechers, if we leave Israel within that 5 years, and don't come back, etc., we default on it in some way, they'll pay. So it wasn't so easy. We got 4 people to sign this. So we come to the bank to finally get the final guarantee, so we can give it to the landowner, to the apartment, the person owning the apartment. And we're sitting at the bank, my fiance and I. My wife now, and we're sitting there, and the clerk at the bank, she says, "Where's your 5th guarantor?" Efo ha'arev ha'chamishi. I said, "What?" I was told we needed 4. She said, "Who told you 4?" I said, "The Aliyah Shaliach." She said, "Efo hu? Where is he?" I said, "Australia." She looked at me and she says, "I'm here. I have the stamp." I say, "You need 5." So I started crying. My wife started yelling at it, or the other way around. I forgot. But anyway, as this is happening, a guy walks by and he sees what's going on, and this guy says, "Ma baya." So I explained to him. I said, "Dude, we need the apartment. We need to sign for it today." She says, "We need a 5th guarantor." He says, "Yesh li cheshbon b'bank." I've got an account in this bank. I'm an Israeli citizen. I've never met this guy in my entire life. I've never met him before. He says, "Ani achtom, I'll be your 5th guarantor." I said, "Lo makir otcha, to lo makir oti." I don't know you, don't know me. He says, "Azma, so what?" He says, "Katuv kol Yisrael arevim zeh bazeh." Every Jew is responsible one for the other. He says, "Sheyeh bichtav." Let it be in writing, what do I care? And he actually signed as our 5th guarantor. That is what it means to understand that you're an Arev. Responsible. Where Menachem Rekanati says in his Tamei HaMitzvos, famous Kabbalist, he says, "Arev ratzam izeh para, ratzam izeh para." The technicalities of this I'm not sure of, so it's discussed, but basically you sign as an Arev, you sign as a guarantor for someone's loan, the creditor can take payment from you, can take payment from someone else. So he says, we're all the Jews. The Ritva puts it this way. He says, what's this idea of being an Arev, that we are all responsible one for another? He says, because Kol Yisrael kaguf echad heim, because we're all like one body. There's a fascinating halacha. I remember I was in Or Sameach in Israel. I was a Rabbi there. We were hosting in one of the luxurious guest apartments in the nearby neighbourhood of Arzea Bira. Not exactly where Jura is, but okay. And we're there Friday night, and Rav Meir Schuster, Allah Shalom, brings in 3 people from the Kosa. Three people, they're like, so I'd already said Kiddush. So they came in, I said Kiddush again. One of my kids said, how can you say Kiddush again? Weren't you already Yotza, the mitzvah? You already fulfilled the mitzvah. So I said, no, I didn't fulfill the mitzvah. And I said, what do you mean? I said, those 3 people have not yet done Kiddush. They don't know how to do Kiddush. That means that my mitzvah is not yet complete. Because Kol Yisrael Gufecha, I can't say I fulfilled the mitzvah. I didn't. Because part of I is them and you. So as John Donne put it, although a great Catholic poet from the 17th century, no man is an island entirely of itself. Every man is a part of the continent, a piece of the main. That is how we look at it in terms of Klal Yisrael, despite the fact that Simon and Garfunkel seem to be cholek. I am a rock. I am an island. They're obviously wrong, right? We have to side with John Donne here in the Machlokas, right? But that is the idea. Kol Yisrael kuguf echad, as the Ritva says. And this idea is very, very central to what Yad La'achim is doing. So we have a few ideas here. We have number 1. We have ne'emonos, to believe in Klal Yisrael. Achan al kein nekavelecha. We have the idea of ne'eman as being yated ne'eman, meaning as being loyal to our fellow Yidden, loyal to our fellow Jews. We have the idea of Kol Yisrael arevim ze bazeh. We have the idea of the kav, the tikva, the line that connects us, because we have never given up hope on another Jew. And we have all of this combined. There's another idea, and I think the Rav very beautifully spoke about the name Yad La'achim. Just want to mention one idea, and I don't know if they had this in mind, but it's interesting. The Gemara says that a Talmid, you have a student, you should push away with the left and draw close with the right. Small doche, v'yamin makarev. People are probably familiar with that. Unfortunately, a lot of times we have people seem to be a lot of left-handed people around. But again, you're supposed to draw close with the right, push away with the left. Right? What is the Hebrew word for a close friend? What's the Hebrew word for a close friend? Yedid. So Moshe Shapiro used to say Yedid comes from the word yad. It's both. It's yad, yud daled, 2 hands. It's one who you embrace with both hands. There's no pushing away whatsoever. With a student, maybe, a little pushing away, you have to have respect. With a yedid nefesh. Right? A friend, there is embrace with both hands, hence the word for close friend is yad, yedid. Right? That is what we're doing here. We have to embrace our fellow Jews, not just with one hand, but with both hands. We have to fulfill our arvus. Yes, Kol Yisrael Reivim Zebazeh, Shiyeh B'chtav. We have to have ne'emonos, and we have to have all of this combined together. I just want to end by saying that I have a wonderfully great announcement, that the entire budget of Yad La'achim already has for the next year. Just a little issue. It's in your bank account still. A little transference. Just a technicality. But anyway, I want to thank you all for coming and for showing your support. And halavai, we should be zoicher to really be yedidim of all of Klal Yisrael, to fulfill our ne'emonos. And when we believe in Klal Yisrael, Kadosh Baruch Hu believes in us, and that nevuah, that which the Rambam says, Kol HaNevi'im Kulam, every single Navi, without exception, prophesied that Klal Yisrael will do tshuva, we should see that. Bimhera v'yameinu, v'vias gold tzedek. Amen.